everybody, we are here with another episode of Something Epic, and this time we're talking to our friends over from Draw Distance about serial cleaners, and that game is looking super fantastic. We have from the dev team Krzysztof S. Thank you so much for being here, Krzysztof. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. And we have, I gotta say this off the top of the jump. I'm a huge fan of your work, Josh Eustis, aka Telefon Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for being here and coming through and talking about, how you're bringing your talent to this project as well.
Thanks for having me.
So I am hyped. I am a big fan of the first game. Krzysztof, I want to first say, congratulations to you and the team for, making such a fantastic game. I think a lot of folks who were a fan of the stealth genre were really hyped to get a chance to play Serial Cleaner when it first came out. How has it been since the previous game launching and now working on getting version 2 out into the world?
Yeah, so we launched the first game in 2017, if I remember correctly. So it's been some time. It was a nice adventure.
Yeah,
we've made a few games between this time.
Yeah, I mean,
right now we are making a sequel to the Serial Cleaner, which is great. It's nice to get back to the story, to this character, and to do something more with that.
Yeah, I mean, you all been making, a bunch of fantastic games. Vampire, the Masquerade is in that mix, and some other ones that a lot of folks are really coming to Draw Distance in that way, and bringing that. So it's good to hear that, you've all kind of built, upon the wonderful energy that was there with the first game. Reception to the game was really high. It feels like a lot of folks not only gave it critical acclaim, but it was just a game that people were talking about when it came out. How long was the process between you kind of having that game launch and then saying, all right, we want to come back to these stories and dig back more into that world?
Okay, so it took us some time. We're making this game right now for like 2 years, 2.5 years, so it's been some time. Yeah, we were thinking about sequel right away when we made the first game. We right away wanted to jump into 90s and to skip 80s. But we needed some more time and a few projects between to get back to this idea. And we did it. Right. It will be in a few months we will be able to play this game, and we are super proud.
I mean, look, the things that were kind of the layers of that wonderful cake in terms of the aesthetic, the kind of stealth action are all still there. I remember looking at the dev diary that you all put out a little while ago, and seeing, how you're thinking about, this transition over to the new game. And one of the biggest conversations was about moving from a very 2D game to now having this game live in a more 3D space. How did that change the way you all thought about the way you're all working on this game, and did it change any of the mechanics or the way you're thinking about the kind of base gameplay?
So when we made the first game, we were making mobile games then, and it was our first game on consoles and on PC. So it was a huge task for us then, and right now we are much more skilled, and we wanted to do something much deeper, bigger, more complex. So I would say that almost everything in this game is much deeper, it took us some time to come up with the whole idea how the 90s should look in our game, and it was quite a process. It took a few months to come up with all of those things to find Basquiat as our main inspiration for the art style, to switch into 3D and to make the game vertical, which was also very hard task from the programming side of the project. But it's paying off. It's something. The first game was sweet but quite simple. Sometimes like to think about it as a bit more complex Pac-Man. And right now we are making something which is like much more inspired by immersive themes, by let's say the newest iterations of Hitman series and things like that. It's still it's an indie game, I would say it's a much smaller budget, but it's still very complex. And the art style, the story, all those things were really important to differentiate us from other games, and we put a lot of effort in that aspect.
So I want to come back to the conversation around the art layers of this, and it's fascinating to hear you all talk about, inspiration from Basquiat and how that kind of came together to kind of give you the feeling and the idea around the visual aesthetic of the 90s in that way. But I want to bring in Josh to this conversation, especially because getting a chance to see that dev diary and hearing that you are a part of this project made me infinitely excited, because I was like, oh man, one of my favorite artists is going to be laying down basically the musical background and layering for this game in that way. How did you get involved with this project? Was this a conversation of you playing this game and seeing it? Did the folks from Draw Distance reach out and was like, we got to get Josh on Telefon Tel Aviv in this?
Oh man, it was so random. The musical director kind of guy at Draw Distance is this fellow named Krzysztof Szczudłowski. Yeah. And Krzysztof he's sort of the vortex around which a widening gyre spins in the music scene in Poland. And so he's sort of beloved by musicians in Poland because he books everybody to play shows there. And which he had done for me back when he was like 22 years old. Yeah, he was still a kid, and he booked me for a show in Warsaw, and we became friends very quickly. And so I literally just got a call from him out of the blue a year and a half ago saying, hey, do you want to do music for this video game? It's going to be very difficult. Do you think you want to try it? It's like, yeah, of course. Like, I mean, my main hobby, I mean, I play video games every day. I have played video games every day since 1979 or 1980, since I first got on Atari when I was a kid. And so while I haven't worked on many, I have a deep knowledge of and deep love of video games, so it's a good fit, I think.
Oh, that's brilliant. I see. That's the beauty of having these conversations. It's like you never know folks that you really you respect and respect their work, like where some of those influences wind up coming through. There's a lot of conversations about how a soundscape can bring a very important or very specific layering to an experience. Did you get a chance to play the first game at all and like go through the kind of like ideas there? What were your thoughts about playing in the first game?
Like the first game, I thought had a really addictive and kind of like Pac-Man. It's a really simple style of gameplay, but it was really addictive and fun somehow. Like I would get clocked on the head by cops consistently, and so then it became fun, and it became this kind of thing of like, cool, I'm running from the police. This is stressful and scary, but also the way the game delivers it in a way where it's like it's lighthearted and it's kind of fun and it's not really serious. The new one is a lot more serious, I think, and but it still has this sort of addictive and kind of fun gameplay, but it's just a much more interactive environment. It's a much more lush world. But yeah, I enjoyed the first one a lot.
That's dope.
Just as like a thing to play before bed, just to shut my brain off,
Yeah. Krzysztof, I want to talk about that because I love what Josh, talked about right there. Is the tone of the game. The tone of the game has changed a bit. It's gotten more gritty. It's gotten more kind of critical of the space and the ideas around it. I am especially because of where you have set this game in. The 90s, in kind of the East Coast vibe of what that city is going to be. How was that from a conversation standpoint with the rest of the team, saying we want to move from a game that is a little bit more lighthearted to something that feels a little bit more, grounded and deeper in that way?
Yeah, I always thought that the premise of the first game was a bit silly, and the idea that you are cleaning murder scenes with vacuum, it's just hilarious, and it's only possible in video games. So we wanted to address that in some way in the second game, and the 90s as a setting is quite fitting with the everything that the 90s were really have to say it extreme. And all those movies from 90s, Quentin Tarantino movies and things like that, were like playing with the idea of showing violence in a funny way and and subversing in a way. So that were things that we were talking together about the sequel, that we would like to do something that will be still fun to play, still quite easy to get into, but we'll tell something more, a bit deeper about the whole idea, and we'll see how it all goes.
I mean, I'm excited to see your take on it. I think as a person who, you always are kind of looking at analogs for things that are representative of times in your life or places you lived or some of those things. What was some of the research you did to kind of like feel like you were going to nail that, not only the art style but the feel of that 90s vibe?
Oh man, we did a lot of research, and we really needed to. We've seen a lot of movies, and we talk a lot about our childhood and our memories. We were like archaeologists looking for past, and yeah, it was fun. So for example, Basquiat, we found Basquiat because we were talking about this specific kind of dark color we know from paintings or things that we've seen when we were younger. And then we saw Basquiat's works, and we, yeah, that's exactly what we were talking about. So those coincidences or all those inspirations come from different directions, and yeah, it was very interesting because at the beginning it was quite scary because everybody, why we are not making 80s game? It would be much easier. We know how it should look like. And yeah, but that was the whole goal, to do something that we didn't know how it should look from the beginning, and to find it in a kind of process together. And yeah, it was stressful, but I think it paid off.
I mean, you didn't miss anything in the 80s. It was all slacks with pleats and big shoulder pads anyway. You didn't miss anything from an aesthetic there. I'm happy you moved over from the 80s into the 90s and just skipped it all together. I'm fine with that from an aesthetic. Josh, I'm curious to hear from your angle too. I am a child of the 90s hip hop era. I was born in, well, I'm not a child of it. I was around in junior high school and high school at that point and doing my thing at that point. Yeah. So that era for me was very, very specific. That's like my golden era of hip hop music in that space. Yeah. For you, thinking about this from a person with so many versions and different musical disciplines that you bring to the table, thinking about what the essence of 90s sound would be for a game like this, what is some of the process that you're thinking about going into, the laying the groundwork for the visuals and the gameplay that we're going to wind up seeing in that game?
Research, honestly. A lot of it, I mean, honestly, 70% of the work for this score was also research. Yeah. Just brushing up on sort of the musicology of the times. I mean, that's a lot of what I was listening to at the time. I've always kind of loved all kinds of music, but there's no denying that, from, let's say, 92 to 98, that I was obsessed with hip-hop. And I mean, this, it was just an insane time for rap music in general. I mean, we had Tupac and Dre and all of this kind of West Coast stuff, and then there was like Biggie and Puffy and all this kind of East Coast stuff, and that trickles all the way down into Mobb Deep and Guru and Tribe Called Quest and all this other stuff. And then, sort of in the mid-90s, like 96-ish, you get Virginia Beach, you get Timbaland and Aaliyah doing stuff, so it's sort of the innovation started seeping into R&B, and it started getting really weird and interesting. And so I was just thinking about, like, okay, if you grew up in a big city in the 90s and you liked rap and R&B, what were you listening to? And it was a combination of everything from Wu-Tang Clan to Camp Lo to Souls of Mischief. I mean, like 93 Till is like, it's like when that comes on, like if you're a certain age and you hear that song, you hear that Rhodes melody that comes in, it makes every hair on your body stand on end. you know, it just does a thing to you. It triggers something in your mind of like some kind of, I don't know, it's some kind of nostalgia thing for guys at our age.
Yeah.
But it's also just like a timeless song. Absolutely holds up.
Yeah.
You know, 25 years later or 30 years later almost now, it's like it's still absolutely slaps. And then and also going back to like in the later 90s, you know, stuff like Missy Elliott and her collaboration with Timbaland and Alia and the early Neptunes productions and stuff like that. All of this stuff was like hugely innovative in music. And so the thing that I wanted to try to do with this, which was probably the most tricky thing I've ever had to do musically, to figure out how to do this, was how to tie this like musical ecosystem together in a way where like we had jazz music that we wrote, and it was recorded. It was supposed to be kind of like late 70s ECM stuff with like a touch of like late 60s kind of Wayne Shorter-ish stuff. And then that stuff would get sampled. The little horn stabs and little samples of that jazz music got used in our imaginary 90s golden era hip-hop stuff. So it kind of works in the game diegetically the same way it worked in the real world. But instead of sampling real-world jazz stuff and real-world hip-hop stuff, we had to just create it all from scratch. Ooh. So it was really fun to do that.
Oh, first of all, I just love the fact that you dipped into some Camp Lo and some Guru and some and some Hyro and all that stuff. Like, oh, like all of that is just like, it is that very, very special time for all of us in our lives who grew up through that space to feel like you could just feel and hear the hiss of a record hitting a needle, or a needle hitting a record, and just feeling those crackles come through, and how important that is. You youngins don't know what you were missing. You have no idea. It doesn't sound the same. I don't care what you say. But
I mean, when's the last time you were in the club and heard Buccini come on and you were just like, oh my God?
I mean, it's one of those things. So like on our show, we you know, in the beginning, we're not supposed to do it, but we play stuff in the beginning of our show before we stream, and it's mostly that stuff because that vibe is the space that I occupy for my happiest places for music, going into that space. Speaking towards that layer of building the score, Krzysztof, I'm curious to hear how you're all working in tandem for that kind of stuff. Are there layers where you're building levels, you and the team are building levels, and then handing those things over to Josh to say, like, what does this feel like to you? Or is this a thing where, Josh, you're giving, you know, the foundation and the underground layers, and giving those to the dev team to say, here's a vibe that I have. Maybe this will, you know, connect with something that you're building. What's been the kind of like workflow for you two and for the teams to kind of build towards, you know, getting and landing exactly where you want it? Krzysztof, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Actually, we spent quite a lot of time talking with Josh about the whole concept of the how we are, all those, we have like 4 characters in our game, and each character has different kind of music, a style of music, each own music, and we talk a lot about this concept, and then we heard we made a few maps. All maps in the game or levels are inspired by movies from 90s, so we're talking about those movies. We've shown Josh some of the early levels that we've made, and after that when we had something visual, when we had something more specific, we were showing that to Josh, and we were constantly talking with each other constantly, and very quite often, especially at the beginning.
I had really good direction.
Good, yeah. Was it something where you were coming to it, Josh, and saying like, oh, well, we've now seen this level. Let me vibe on this for a bit and see if I can compose something that kind of fits it? Or was it you having things that you were like, ooh, this sounds really like that kind of vibe, and then, you know, that wind up being incorporated? How was that for you on your end?
I have to say, this guy is a really great showrunner, and nice. Working for him has been a real pleasure, because he's so specific in what he's looking for, and has a really a really specific and eloquent way of talking about what he thinks is the right thing. And so then really it was just my job to sort of meet him in the middle, to sort of make something that sort of checked all the boxes, but that I didn't hate. And in the end, that part of it was probably the easiest part, is figuring out how to make these guys happy. Yeah, we agreed on a lot about how it should go down, and we would just play idea tennis about what the sound could be, and I would send a sketch or something, and they would say, it's great, but can we try a little more like this, or a little more like this? And I'm not used to working that way. I'm used to having absolutely no one offer any input into anything that I'm doing, because I'm such a control freak over everything. But it was actually kind of fun to get a little bit of direction from them about what is going to serve the story, because I'm realizing my role here is different. It's not making a record, it's serving the story. So there are a lot of things that I had to, I had to sort of like check my ego kind of at the door, in a way of like not making it super tricked out and with crazy production or anything, also because it needs to be period correct to the 90s. So a lot of these production techniques that I use now weren't available then. So that was the other crazy thing. That was like, okay, interfacing with Krzysztof and figuring out exactly what his vision was for this specific level, and how he felt the music should move around the characters, and whether the music was sort of diegetic, like experienced by the characters, or whether it's experienced by the audience playing the game. Which is a crazy fun challenge, but great director. I would work for this guy again. I would love to work with this guy again, man. He was so awesome to work with. You
kind of forget about period era tech when it comes to making music in that way too, which is also very, very interesting in the way that sounds. As a person played around in that space a little bit when I was a little bit younger, MPC 2000 sound different than other stuff than that are in the space now.
They work different, and they make you program beats in a certain way, and so I had to really get outside of my head of like just working in a DAW, which is kind of what I've always done. I started on hardware in the early 90s, but as soon as you were able to start really making music on computers, I abandoned hardware as quickly as possible. But I had to go back to that a lot. I had to really work those kinks out for this, because so much of this score, especially the diegetic music, really needed to be done a certain way, and that meant not really using the computer for a lot of it, using a bunch of hardware. I don't know. It was a lot of fun.
That's badass. I love hearing stuff like that. And Krzysztof, I want to dig back in, because I think there was a really good point that I want to dig into before we get up out of here. I loved you talking, or at least broaching the conversation about now having these 4 different characters, multiple characters within the game now, and how there's not only different levels for those folks, but different kinds of stories and the ways they're kind of coming to this. How was that kind of crafting now these multiple stories that because I haven't played anything yet? I'm hoping they intertwine in lots of different ways and that kind of stuff. How are you all thinking about now broadening the way that the kind of language of the lore of the game is going to change because of these new characters?
It was amazing. Actually, one of the first idea about the sequel, it was to call it Serial Cleaners, so as Alien and Aliens. And to do something much bigger, and to like, one of the first idea also was that to have the main character from the first game, like during, like, I don't know, psychology, like talking with each other, with people about his problems.
Got it.
And that was the first idea, and then we added those characters that we in some way mirroring the main character, and have something common, the history together, and they did something together. They were a gang for the whole decade, and oh my god, it was fun to do, and I'm really I'm waiting to see how people will react about that. And to take inspiration from movies from 90s, like Usual Suspects, like Pulp Fiction, like those I would say anthology stories, those stories in which someone tells a story inside the story, things like that. So we had a lot of fun, and we have a few surprises in the game about the structure of the game and the flashbacks and things like that.
I mean, one of my favorite things within the first game was you having these callbacks to, like you said, very era-specific movies and things like that in bonus levels and things like that. So, you know, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like potentially some of that stuff will return in the next game.
Not the same way in the first game.
Sure.
It's much more story focused and character focused this time. But we made we had additional contracts in the first game inspired by 70s movies, and we really enjoyed making that. So when we started making sequel, we said we need to make the whole game inspired by movies. And I need to remind you guys, we are from Poland. So I've never been into New York or Los Angeles. I don't know how. I was once in Seattle, and that's all. So we just watched all those movies and had like amazing opportunity to work with Josh, someone who actually been there, lived that, and yeah, it was a big help for us.
I love it.
Get the whole thing. So yeah.
I am very excited to see the Polish viewpoint on bodegas. That's going to be my favorite thing to see how you pull that into the game.
I think there is a bodega in one of the levels, or actually, yeah. There.
I don't know.
Let's not give away too much.
Sorry,
there is
guys.
definitely a bodega in the game.
I mean, look, if you have a bodega in the game, that automatically puts it as Game of the Year level for me. That automatically.
I mean, Kahlief, it's not as narrow. It's not as narrow as a real world bodega would be, but it's a bodega.
The beautiful part about
it's just wider.
The beautiful part about serial cleaners having a bodega in it is that as a cleaner, one of your main tools of choice is bleach, and bodegas are nothing but bleach and bad food. So you automatically
egg sandwich on this side,
bacon, egg, and cheese, and bleach.
Yeah.
It's those two things crossing over. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today for Something Epic. Again, you know, this is a game that I'm really excited for, really hyped to get a chance to dig into, you know, all of the story and Josh, your layers of how you're making this score kind of really connect with the player and bring that story home. So to have you both here is fantastic, and thank you both for spending some time with me and the rest of our Chicago audience at home. So thank you so much for being here. Everybody else,
thanks for having us.
Awesome. I'm excited that we're going to get a chance to play this, and you know, we got to talk some more 90s hip hop at some point.
Yeah.
Everybody at home, thank you so much for being here. Again, we're going to go and check out some more of our work. If you missed out more of this content, again, this has been a wonderful sponsored video from our friends over at Epic Games. So please make sure you're checking out all of the work that they are doing, all the work that we are doing alongside with them. And until next month, we'll see you all very, very soon for Something Epic. Much love and peace. Before we let you go, we had to just let you know, hey, we are still Epic partners. We are still rocking with our friends from Epic, and those folks have been kind enough to help sponsor all of this content. But before we let you go for this episode of Something Epic, please go check out the Epic Mega Sale. It is still going on until 6/16. Make sure you go in and checking that out. Make sure you use the code SPAWNONME at checkout to help Chicago grow, and definitely make sure you're checking out some of those great sales. There's a lot of great games in the mix that you can go grab and snag from the store. So much love to you all, and we'll see you all next month with a new episode of Something Epic.